This is a podcast from the Business Times.
I have a funny analogy about money. I liken financial skill sets and acumen to flossing your teeth.
Huh.
Right? So talk about bad habits, right? It's exactly that.
A lot of us don't floss our teeth,
Yes, this is what happens. If your parents wear dentures, they will never need to floss their teeth.
Right.
So they will never need to teach their kids to floss their teeth. I never knew how to floss my teeth until I had a really bad tooth incident.
Because our parents don't do it, what?
Yeah. So even now, I'm trying to get my daughter to brush her teeth. It's I don't know how we're going to do it, but I learned from my friends. They say it's role modeling. It's so crazy.
True lah. I mean, your kids see you doing it, they were okay.
Yeah, but you have to sync schedules,
Yeah, brush your teeth at 9 o'clock or something.
Exactly.
Right? Money habits, good or bad, are often passed down from one generation to the next without us even realizing it. Think about how your parents handled money when you were growing up. Were they savers or spenders? Maybe they thought a lot about money, or maybe it was never talked about at home. On today's episode, we're going to explore how those childhood experiences shape our relationship with money now that we're adults. And we'll go through strategies to become aware of your own money narratives and to rewrite the ones that are holding you back from achieving your financial goals. Welcome to Money Hacks, a podcast series by the Business Times, where we explore useful financial tips to help you on your money managing and wealth growing journey. I'm your host, Lee Kim Siang. Here to tell us more is the co-founder of PlayMoolah, Audrey Tan. Hi Audrey, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So, to start things off, can you tell us a little bit about PlayMoolah? What do you guys do?
So we are a financial well-being company. Our goal is really to have young people, families, organizations to really use money as a tool for a flourishing life. So to rethink some of these challenging relationship to money and to try and navigate the world of adulting and finances in a way that works for a young person.
So in your work, you use this term money narratives a lot. What exactly does it mean though? What are some of the common ones that we inherit from our parents?
So money narratives can be your scripts that you've heard from your grandparents. So scripts could be stories around money.
A long time ago, something cost X number of dollars.
Exactly. Or, this happened to me because we didn't have money at that time. So these are the scripts and the stories that are formed across different generations. And an example of a money narrative that maybe not so positive could be something like money is evil, money is scarce, money is the root of all conflict. But on the flip side, there are also positive narratives. So for instance, it could be money is a tool that can be used to positively impact the community and my family. So there could be positive as well as negative narratives.
So how do money narratives shape our financial behavior as we grow up?
See, the thing about money narratives, which is quite unique, is that they often operate at the unconscious level.
Right.
And because they're so unconscious, we don't even realize they're there. We don't even realize that they're driving our decisions, our attitudes, maybe even the way we relate our perspective to money and the way we take action around money. What I've come to realize is that, with money narratives, a lot of the times it's about surfacing this into a conscious level such that we can begin to understand how these narratives could be driving our behavior. So for example, money is a form of security. As a result of that, I may end up becoming a hoarder because money gives me security.
Right.
And therefore I hoard because I think it is actually good for me. So that's how it shapes the way we, make decisions or unconsciously take action, which is quite crazy,
Yeah, I get what you mean. Because to us, this is what it's always been like. We saw our parents hoarding or whatever bad habits they had, then we subconsciously do the same thing when we are adults.
Exactly.
In a recent survey, MoneySmart looked into how parents influence Singaporeans' financial habits, and the results were quite stark.
And as an overall key finding, we see that 56% of respondents believe their parents strongly influence their financial habits. And almost half, about 46%, actively are trying to go against their parents' bad habits.
That's Edwin Ooi, Senior Financial Advisory Specialist at MoneySmart.
Right, so for bad habits, we found that 59% of those whose parents overspend tend to do the same. 63% of those whose parents shop impulsively also tend to shop impulsively. And 58% of those parents struggled with debt have faced similar issues as well.
Okay, Edwin, can you tell us what were the motivations behind conducting this study?
What we wanted to do is really to share with people something that we don't normally speak about because it's a little bit taboo, right, when it comes to money. So I think doing that puts people in a space where they are able to talk about these things a bit more freely.
What are some of the common bad habits that Singaporeans have learned from their parents? Are there any good habits?
I think bad habits, definitely taking on too much debt. With this whole issue of buy now, pay later, back in our parents' days, these things were already available. Maybe in a different structure. Loans, right? Taking on credit that is a bit too much. So these are things that somehow it is imbibed into our lifestyle, right? We actually do spend without really thinking of what the consequences are. And for good financial habits, every parent would definitely want their child to have a certain lifestyle.
Save money also lah.
Right? Save money, right? You create a savings plan. I think savings plan is always the most talked about last time. Keeping track of expenses and of course, smart spending. Like, buying things, comparing prices, checking out what are the best deals. And I think every Singaporean loves the good deals, right?
So how aware are Singaporeans of the habits they might have picked up from their parents, be they good or bad?
I think they're pretty aware. Mainly, when they start working as a working adult, a lot of people would then realize that they're not so good with keeping their finances in check. And many a times, the first thing they think about is, what did we do? Or how did I grow up? What did my parents do? Right? And then they start to realize that, actually, there are some pretty bad habits that has been ingrained in them.
What was it like for you growing up with your parents? How did their financial habits affect you?
I think personally for me, I grew up in a pretty financial savvy family. My parents were in the finance industry.
Right.
So understanding the value of money, how it comes about from an early age, it was already there.
So as a kid, did you save or would you spend most of your allowance?
My parents taught me a lot of business sense. Allowance that was given, they gave me a choice.
Don't tell me you invested.
Okay. Back then, of course, as a kid, you can't really invest it, right? But I think in a way was how we could delay the certain gratification that we wanted. My dad would tell me, like, what if you save this a little longer? Imagine what we could do with that much more. So the idea was kind of ingrained in me as well.
Still to come. So you might have inherited some negative money scripts. What can you do about it? That's after the break.
In the latest episode of Lens on Singapore, we look at a disturbing global trend and ask the question, is anyone too young for cancer?
Which is when I went to the hospital for a full body check, and that's when they found out more.
Are young adults prepared to deal with the emotional, physical, and financial impact of facing such a daunting medical crisis? The Business Times podcast team goes behind the numbers to get some answers. Listen to Lens on Singapore at bt.sg or wherever you get your podcasts.
And now, back to Money Hacks from the Business Times.
Welcome back to Money Hacks. Talking about money narratives is making me reflect on my childhood. Now I'm questioning which parts of my financial habits are things I picked up from my parents. Audrey, if I'm just beginning to understand this about myself, what can I do about it? How can individuals untangle the money narratives they've inherited and unlearn these bad habits they may have picked up from their parents?
Yeah, I love the choice of word, right? Untangle. Because sometimes they've been so knotted in our lives that we don't even realize that they're there.
Right.
So I think first things first is really about coming to awareness. What are these dominant narratives are actually driving your daily life? And so once we begin to acknowledge and say, okay, yes, money is a source of conflict, and because of that, I have a poor relationship to money, then how can I begin to rewrite, and I would use the word reframe, some of these slightly challenging narratives into positive ones, right? So a bad example of a slightly more challenging narrative could be that money is security, or money is a source of all evil, or money equates success, right? So these are some challenging narratives. So when you say money equates success, what happens is that as a result of that, we may end up becoming very siloed and very focused on chasing down the dollar, right? At the expense of our well-being, our health, and also seeing that, money can be a tool beyond just personal success. So when we begin to reframe that, we actually have an activity where we put in a circle, right? What were some of your early memories around money? So oftentimes, these money narratives may be driven by our childhood trauma or childhood experiences that shape and etch in our mind a very specific type of relationship to money. So a good way then is, beginning to write it down. And we even have this activity where you can use your left hand, right, to draw. So using your non-dominant hand to bring to light what has been in the, in the dark, for instance. And so then that allows you to say, okay, if this was the experiences that I've had before, how can I begin to rethink and reframe? So what could be a comparative narrative that may be a more positive one to say money equates success, right? It could be something like money is a tool, money is a resource, money is a consequence of value creation in the world.
It's not the end goal.
Yeah, and when you think about value creation, it's not for me, but the value is created for people around me. Value creation for my community, my family, my organization, for the world.
For parents with young kids, how can they start to build healthy money narratives from a young age?
Yeah, this is such an important, as a parent to a young child.
Right.
You know, kids at the age of preschool going, they may already begin to observe their parents. So that's really quite a good age to begin having basic conversations around money. You know, how money is formed, what is money even, you know, for a young child. At the kindergarten and primary school age, we see that that's where more in-depth concepts like savings, budgeting, goal setting, these are things that can be introduced to children. When I think of my daughter growing up a little bit more, I would say to her, you know, what are some of these narratives that may have in the family? So what we say often is having a common narrative within your family, because your husband and your wife may have such different narratives that when you come together, it's like conflicting, right? Therefore, if we can have a common narrative, that kind of helps us to get things kind of a bit more smoother out to go. And even for older children, teenage children or young adults, what I've found is that, you know, we don't know our parents' story. And when we sit and begin to hear each other's story, it creates empathy for why my parents behave so oddly, you know.
It's different generations also, right?
Exactly. So it's really about uncovering these stories so that we can begin to understand where each of the family members are coming from, and then really creating a sense of a more common narrative.
Like you said, awareness of the issue is important, right? So that we, or rather new parents, should not perpetuate all these bad financial habits. Otherwise, it will just, you know, your kid will pick up all these bad habits from you, or, you know.
Exactly, absolutely. And some of these sometimes are so unconscious. We don't even realize that we may be doing this. Therefore, having what we call money conversations will be so key, because we realize that money is not a topic that we talk about if you think about our culture.
Well, we argue about it.
Absolutely,
But,
exactly.
yeah.
We have conflict about it, which is oftentimes what happens. Absolutely right.
Audrey, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been Money Hacks from the Business Times. I'm Lee Kim Siang. Till next time.
This is a podcast by the Business Times. Find more BT podcasts at businesstimes.com.sg/podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is meant to provide general information only. SPH Media accepts no liability for loss arising from any reliance on the podcast or use of third parties' products and services. Please consult professional advisors for independent advice.